Less than 2 years after 9/11, Abu Omar, appears on the radar of the CIA, of Italian intelligence, and he's giving fiery anti-American speeches in the lead up to the Iraq War. I mean, try to imagine the way we're contending with, not just as a nation here in the US, but around the world, this sort of fear. There's so much fear in the aftermath of these attacks in Paris. And that's the same type of fear that was taking place within these, intelligence services. Hey there, I'm Jason Leopold. I'm an investigative reporter for Vice News, and I'm here on the line today to talk about a new documentary I just produced about a notorious CIA rendition and one former CIA officer's quest to clear her name for being wrapped up in this rendition. I'm joined by my co-producer, host, and partner in crime, Kaj Larsen, who is in Los Angeles. Hey, Kaj, how's it going?
Good, Jay. We miss you out here on the West Coast. We're separated by a continent now, but excited to talk a little torture and rendition today.
And it's a good time for it, huh?
Always.
Yeah,
it's always a good time for the Inquisition. So
we're like the two dudes in the office nobody wants to sit next to. We're always just talking about torture.
Torture, rendition, national security,
right?
Classified info, maybe.
Right.
You guys always keep it light.
Yeah.
There goes the clearance.
Dark clouds hanging over us sometimes.
Believe it or not, there's some people on the internet who actually wanted to talk to you, and they're Skyping with us today. So let's say hey to Sean first. So Sean, you there?
Yeah, how's it going?
Hey, Sean.
Hey, Jason. Hi, Kaj. How you guys doing today?
Great.
Good. I just had a few questions for you. Just watched the documentary last night, and I really liked it. My first question is, how did you gain access to Sabrina?
Well, Kaj and I have been working with Sabrina for about a year. I mean, she's a former CIA officer who her story has been told before. She has been she was indicted, prosecuted, convicted for this rendition. But Kaj and I were hoping that there may be some new information, some new details about her case. And that surfaced some months ago, and we worked on this, and we headed out to Portugal, where she was. Got some, Kaj, you want to weigh in on any of that?
Yeah, actually, Jason and I have been working in the national security domain for the better part of a decade, and Jason has a deep reservoir of contacts within the intelligence community, and I have some very good relationships there as well. And about a year ago, Sabrina came out and had lunch with us here in Los Angeles and was sort of pining about how difficult her life was, and you could almost sense like a sense of desperation that she was going to do something. And then when she finally did, when she actually traveled overseas despite the arrest warrant against her, the first person she called was Jason and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And we said, even though this thing happened almost a decade ago, it's over a decade ago actually, it's still really relevant today because of what Sabrina did.
Yeah, can we, hey Michael, can we play a clip, the second clip, just to sort of gain an understanding of what she's going through?
You have tried multiple channels to get your name cleared from this incident, right?
Oh, absolutely. I had gone through every single option internally in the CIA, starting with the ombudsman, who was told to back off, the grievance office, the EEO, even office that were probably not even relevant to anything. I was just trying to find something. And the interesting thing about Washington is how a cover-up takes effect. It's like a cancer. It starts off in the CIA, and then they involve the Department of Defense. So then it spread to justice, it spread here, there, and then all the way up to Congress. The US starts off with one thing alone. We don't acknowledge renditions.
So yeah, so this is that was just a moment in this documentary where Kaj was speaking to Sabrina about all the efforts that she took over the years to try and clear her name, to try and gain some accountability in this case, and what she was really up against, and the fact that her efforts went nowhere.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
Yes, I did. I did notice, I found it strange actually, that there's no other CIA officers, or at least you didn't mention this, within that operation that are trying to clear their names. Because if in case like what happened actually occurred, then why are not other CIA officers trying to clear their names unless they don't want to go to Europe? But I just wanted to know, do you know if there's any other CIA officers that are trying to clear their names besides Sabrina?
Kaj, can you take that one?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. A totally legitimate question. I mean, one important thing to remember is that of the 23 convictions, 19 of them were indicted under essentially false names, right? These were aliases, covers that they were using for the operation. So those particular convictions carry no actual weight. They have no impact on the people's lives, the real people's lives. There has been some really good investigative journalism work where they've been able to trace who those people are, but since they're convicted under aliases, they're free to travel under their real names, or if, like, some of them are still potentially contracting for the agency, they can travel under other aliases. Now, of the 4 declared people who are actually convicted under their real names, Sabrina is one of them, and she claims that she wasn't actually involved in the rendition. And then there is another guy named Bob Lady, who was the station chief in Milan at the time. And Bob Lady is a longtime CIA officer in Italy. He actually had a villa in Italy that he planned to retire in. He was arrested in Panama briefly when he did travel. He was able to get out before he was extradited to Italy. So this rendition and the subsequent convictions has had vast consequences for Bob Lady, who intended to retire in his villa in Italy, which was then subsequently seized. The other 2 parties seem not to be interested. None of the other, also significant is that the other people who were actually convicted under their real names, none of them claim, as Sabrina does, that they were not deeply involved in the rendition. They have remained quiet. Sabrina says that her conviction was false because she wasn't there. She claims she was on a ski trip at the time. As Jason will tell you, the Italian prosecutor feels differently.
Yeah, and in addition to that, just go into your question just quickly, is that, this was this is a story about her efforts, and the fact of the matter is that the length that she has gone to try and clear her name is pretty unprecedented. I mean, there are very, very few people in this world, in this former CIA officers. In the intelligence community that have taken the steps that she's taken. She's written letters to members of Congress. She's met with the House and Senate oversight committees. She's sued the CIA, the State Department. She has hired a number of lawyers and met with human rights groups. So what she's doing, what she continues to do to try and clear her name is very unique. And so this story is really about her efforts and what she was facing.
All right, thanks for the clarification. I just have one last question. It's a lengthy one. I'll try to get through it. In regards to France and the attacks that occurred in Paris last week, they've already declared a state of emergency, started their own form of the Patriot Act, if you will, or at least the stepping stone towards it, with warrantless searches and wiretaps, etc. With that being said, do you think we could potentially see France or other EU nations attempt to breach sovereignty of another country to apprehend a suspect, as in the case in Italy and the United States?
That's a good question. This was a particularly unique case again. Italy, the reason why the prosecutor was so upset is that it violated Italy's sovereignty, and he said it was flat out illegal. Look, after 9/11, the U.S. and other countries put in place a number of different counterterrorism policies that allowed them to undertake, whether it's a rendition or indefinite detention. So, I mean, it really remains to be seen what the U.S. and what other countries would do. I mean, it's important to note that even though after Obama was sworn into office and he outlawed the use of enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, and the use of the CIA's black site facilities. He also said that he was going to end rendition, but renditions still continue under this administration. So it's up in the air. Kaj, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, just briefly what I'll say is I think what you saw prior to the Paris attacks was a trend line of looking back at the policies and practices in the global war on terror and thinking, especially in Europe, about accountability and how we can create a bulwark against what they believe or many of them perceive to be excesses in the global war on terror. I think what Paris might have the effect of in the future is kind of a cooling effect on that accountability. The French now have, I don't want to make out of scale comparisons, but this could be a very seminal moment for French, and they have to now think very deeply about all those issues that we had to think about as a nation after 9/11, which is how do you balance liberty versus security and all of the complicated legal and moral issues that raises.
Indeed. Thanks for your questions. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So, Jason, Kaj, we got some people tweeting at us, and just a reminder, we'll be watching for tweets during the show if anybody has any questions. But Matt Mills wants to know, when you guys were listening to Sousa tell her story about her ski holiday, did you believe it? Was there any part of you that questioned the veracity of her story?
I think Kaj would be best to answer that question. There was a very tense exchange between Kaj and Sabrina at that particular moment outside of the cafe in Portugal. Kaj?
Yeah. Yeah, Jason's absolutely right. Absolutely. I mean, look, both Jason and I are skeptics. And there were parts of Sabrina's story that didn't completely make sense to us or didn't seem to add up. And we approached her entire line of defense with, I think, a healthy degree of skepticism. We don't actually have any empirical evidence that she was on a ski trip during this time. The prosecutor also claims that he has evidence to the contrary. But the ski trip ends up being a little bit of a red herring because, as we learned from Armando Spataro, the prosecutor, it's not just the people who execute it, it's the people who are involved in the planning and things like that. So yes, in fact, Jason and I had a few chuckles in the edit bay. Every time she said it, there's something about her delivery that doesn't seem genuine. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether she was on a ski trip or not. Those legal issues and her culpability is there regardless of the ski trip.
And at the same time, Kaj, she actually understood that this is, we're reporters. Our job is to, ferret out not just information, but the facts and the truth. And that's what we were doing. That's what you were doing when you were discussing that with her. So, in this world of which we're dealing with, former CIA operatives, and there's a lot of covert activity, and the bottom line is we don't know. We're trying to determine what's true and what's not true, and but that's what we were up against. So that skepticism was definitely there. Thanks, Michael, for that tweet.
Oh yeah, and Matt, dude, I hope we answered your question there. So let's say hey to Essa, who's calling us on Skype. Essa, why don't you chime in with your questions, man?
Hi guys.
What's up, Essa?
Got a question. So how far do the CIA have to go before they become the criminals themselves?
Kaj, take that question, brother.
Well, I think you were asking how far does the CIA have to go before they become criminals themselves? Yeah. There is an entire body and statute of legislation that governs CIA activities. And I think there's this mythology out there that the CIA can sort of operate at will and they can make up their own rules and that they can assassinate people. There certainly is a direct, presidential findings, like sign off at the highest levels. And that's one of the things that was so fascinating about our case that Sabrina kept hammering, and I think rightfully so, is that this rendition was not a rogue rendition. It was signed off at the very highest levels of government. Now, that being said, regardless of whether it was domestically considered legal, the activities of the agency, it appears to be a clear violation of international law. So one of the reasons Jason, Leopold, and I were so fascinated with this case is that the pressure and the tension it put on international law and diplomacy. I don't have a good answer to your question because the line is super blurry. What's legal in the United States could be criminal in Italy if you kidnap an Italian off of sovereign nation's soil. It's a murky area, and it's continues to be relevant today, which is why we're so committed to doing this documentary.
Yeah, and Sabrina even said that when you were speaking with her, Kaj, and you asked the question about rendering the cleric Abu Omar to Egypt, and the fact that Egypt is a country known for torture and human rights violations. And Kaj had asked Sabrina, wouldn't that alone make this rendition illegal? And she noted that not in the U.S. It may be so outside of the U.S., outside of domestic territory, but the findings that were put into place after 9/11 essentially authorized the CIA to do everything to root out this threat from Al-Qaeda, and it did give the CIA unprecedented powers. So she had noted that many times that there's that her efforts are about accountability, and she does want to see individuals prosecuted, but that's very unlikely that that would happen.
Okay, just one more question. When blowback does happen, who's ultimately responsible?
Kaj again.
Did you say blowback is when blowback happens? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the great unanswered questions of this documentary is who's accountable for these actions and who ultimately signs off on it. At the end of the day, it looks like there was some high-level collusion between top officials in the United States government and top officials in the Italian government. And maybe this is just my own personal opinion, having spent some time at as a foot soldier at the low rungs of the totem pole. But my instinct is that it's never really the people who execute these actions. It's the people who design and authorize the larger policies that should really be held accountable. And it's also where there's been no accountability. So what Jason mentioned earlier in terms of torture by proxy is what he was alluding to, sending somebody to a country to be tortured. The truth is there's been zero accountability for those types of actions.
Yeah, and the other part of that is that in this documentary, aside from telling Sabrina's story, there's also this story about justice, her pursuit of justice, the prosecutor's pursuit of justice, the member of European Parliament who is trying to pursue justice, even Abu Omar, the cleric who's trying to pursue justice in in the European Court of Human Rights. So they all are somewhat self-serving in their efforts to do so, but are very interested in that outcome. It's difficult. These are these are programs that largely remain under the radar. You have Europe, many European countries who cooperated with the CIA and allowed this to happen. That's what makes this particular rendition in this case so unique. The fact that the prosecutor, indicted and won convictions regarding the roles that these CIA officers played, I mean, that's unheard of. And so he was really operating on his own, whereas in other countries, it's just, they've just been looking to sweep it under the rug.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for coming on, man. So,
hey, Michael, can we just, actually, I think this would actually make a good moment to sort of play that first clip where Kaj is actually talking about the rendition of Abu Omar, because we actually went out to the actual street where he was rendered in Milan.
On February 17th, 2003, Abu Omar disappeared off a street in Milan. So Abu Omar is walking down this very street on his way to the mosque for noon prayers. He's stopped by an Italian police officer who's also a CIA informant. And during this time, Abu Omar fails to notice that there's a white van parked directly behind him. Door to the van slides open. Two hands reach out, grab him, rip him into the vehicle. Door slams shut, and he disappears.
Yeah, and you know, when we were out there, actually walking on that street and seeing that this is, you know, that this not only happened in broad daylight, but what our surroundings, what was taking place. I mean, that's where it sort of hit us. Like, this was a bold move by the CIA, right? I mean, this was, wow, broad daylight, you know, noon. I mean, it's unbelievable that they did that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like, this was a difficult documentary to make, but I think that was our most interesting day, when we could actually, you know, walk 100 meters in Abu Omar's shoes, walk down the very street that he walked every day, and sort of put ourselves in the headspace of what happened on that fateful day in 2003. It kind of put the whole thing in context. And like you said, to do it in broad daylight like that was ballsy, to say the least.
We did see, though, lots and lots of white vans going through those streets, so kind of understood why they chose a white van.
Either that or they were watching you.
Yeah. Anyway, we can go on to our next question.
Yeah, and you know, guys, we actually got this question from Sabrina de Sousa herself. She sent
Excellent.
this to you, Jason Leopold, via email, so you already know what's coming.
Oh,
so
wow,
I know. Hate to lift the curtain a little bit, but in your interview with the Milan prosecutor, did he ever explain why not a single Egyptian official was held accountable or factored into the investigation? And she's pointing out that the prosecutor noted that he couldn't obtain a conviction without the smoking gun. So why weren't Egyptian officials held accountable?
I mean, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I think it's just a simple case of jurisdiction. I mean, already what he did was so far-reaching in terms of his investigation, but really the crime that he had jurisdiction over took place on Italian soil, and that's where he could launch prosecution. There's been some other nascent efforts now in other European nations, i.e. Germany, to potentially reopen this investigation. Germany is relevant because the Rendition flight, which is sometimes pejoratively dubbed the torture bird, where the plane they actually took Abu Omar on made a stop in Germany at Ramstein Air Force Base. So the German prosecutor who's been looking at this case believes he has jurisdiction, but quite frankly, there's no long arm of justice from the Italian perspective that can reach into Egypt and look at what happened to Abu Omar after he was subsequently renditioned there.
Yeah, and you know, just on that note with Portugal, I mean, that was the sort of the big reveal, if you will, while we were out there, is that Germany, that is, that Sabrina is working with a German prosecutor, German human rights legal firm, and hopes of getting a new investigation opened, that the prosecutor will take it on in Germany, and ultimately that would reveal new details about this and perhaps lead to her being cleared for culpability in it as well. So that was an important note from our interview.
And it also just goes to show like how absolutely committed to this cause Sabrina is, right? This didn't end with her documentary produced by us. Like, she continues to hammer and hammer. She is relentless, which it does beg the question, like, why? Like, and it makes you feel a lot of empathy for her plight.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, Sabrina, thanks for keeping up your fight and sending us a question.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Guys, let's say hey to Sam. He's our last Skype caller for the day.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, how are you guys? So I guess I have a question, which is Why doesn't Sabrina stand trial? Isn't it,
Can you repeat that?
isn't
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Why doesn't Sabrina stand trial if she's wanted, and if she believes so much in her innocence? Why doesn't she simply go to court to clear her name?
That's a good question. In fact, another question that Kaj had asked the prosecutor, Armando Spataro, and he even said, if Sabrina de Sousa wants to clear her name, she should come to Italy and tell us everything. Kaj followed that up by saying that to Sabrina, and she said that there's just simply no way she can get a fair trial in Italy. It's important to note, as you were sort of alluding to there, that these convictions were in absentia. The CIA officers and even Abu Omar, actually, were all convicted in absentia. And so there's a lot of criticism revolving around the absentia type convictions that prosecutors like Armando Spataro, who have a long history of going after mafia figures and leftist terrorists, using that, because sometimes it's actually seen as a human rights violation, not giving someone the opportunity to defend themselves. But in the case of Sabrina, I mean, she was still at the time working for the CIA. And so she was back here, in the United States working for this agency still, and was hoping that the agency and even the State Department, because she was operating under as a diplomat in diplomatic cover, would invoke diplomatic immunity, would work out there to try and clear her name or in the names of other officers. In addition to that, there was a travel ban. She was unable to leave the country. So there were many complicating factors in that. And, the bottom line is she says that she would never get a fair trial. Kaj, you had, there was a lengthy discussion with Armando Spataro regarding that.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly understandably his position, but I think if you look from Sabrina's perspective, I love good pasta. Leopold and I had some great meals when I was in Italy. It's not worth risking incarceration in prison if you're Sabrina to go back there and stand trial.
So I guess this kind of leads into my next question. Is you said that she was sort of a sympathetic figure, but this incident happened, this abduction, this extraordinary rendition happened in 2003, and she didn't leave the CIA until 2010, which would indicate to me that it's not a great crisis of crisis of conscience that she's suffering, and it's really more about her inconvenience that she's not eating pasta. Help me understand this.
Kaj, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I think it is important to note that they weren't convicted until 2009. But yeah, I think Sabrina is both a sympathetic and a complicated character. And my personal analysis is that one of the drivers, and this entire story is a multi-layered onion, right? It's operating at Sabrina's level and her own personal quest to clear her name, but it also has great implications for international law and diplomacy, and that's why it was so intriguing to us. But I think from Sabrina's perspective, my outside analysis is that Sabrina was driven in large part by her desire to be able to travel and see her family, right? Her father was sick, and she told us about this, and her mother at one point. So she wants to be able to see her mother in India. And so it was extraordinarily created an incredible emotional burden for her to not be able to do that. At the same time, I think there's been an evolution within Sabrina as she has fought this thing over the years, and that she has either always believed or really come to believe that the rendition, as in her own words, was unethical, immoral, and illegal.
Yeah, and she even said that. I mean, those are the exact words that she used in the interview to say what her feelings are right now. But at the same time, as Kaj noted, there's she was driven by the fact that she wanted to see her family. She ultimately resigned from the CIA when they implemented this travel ban, and just made it very difficult for her.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to transition a little bit to Abu Omar. I have a question about Abu Omar, which is that what was he sort of guilty of? Why was he picked up off the street? Was he just, I know he was kind of hounded out of Egypt, probably for the same kind of proselytizing activities that he was then doing in Italy. And then he was eventually returned to Egypt. And so why was he targeted for, this rendition? Why was he returned to Egypt? And what are they preventing him from doing to this day, I imagine?
Yeah, Kaj will weigh in on this as well. I mean, keep in mind, this was immediately or not long after 9/11. 2 years after 9/11, less than 2 years after 9/11, Abu Omar, appears on the radar of the CIA, of Italian intelligence, and he's giving fiery speeches about fiery anti-American speeches in the lead up to the Iraq War. I mean, try to imagine the way right now what we're contending with, not just as a nation here in the U.S. but around the world. This sort of fear. There's so much fear in the aftermath of these attacks in Paris, and that's the same type of fear that was taking place within these intelligence services. And so he popped up on the radar. He was someone that that was part of a network in Milan that the prosecutors there and investigators were saying that were perhaps planning some type of attack, sending jihadis to Iraq and Afghanistan to fight against the U.S. And he, in terms of why he was sent to Egypt, he's Egyptian. He received political asylum in Italy, but it was those anti-American speeches that that apparently were very concerning. And Kaj had this great exchange with the prosecutor about the Milanese network, if you will. Can you weigh in on that, Kaj?
Yeah, it was surprising for me to learn that Milan itself, because it seems like an unlikely place, had become a logistical hub for some of the early al-Qaeda activities in 2003. So we're talking financing to terrorism, moving foreign fighters around the world and getting them to Iraq to fight in the Middle East, and then the sort of general incendiary speeches that Jason was referring to. That's what caught everybody's attention. When you look back at the Italian investigation, because the Italians were investigating him, you see a lot of wiretaps and a lot of conversations recorded where he's referencing certain code words and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty clear in hindsight, and also based on the in absentia conviction of Abu Omar, that he was definitively not just preaching sort of anti-American, anti-Western sentiment, but that he was sort of deeply involved in these logistical, operational stuff for early al-Qaeda. Bottom line, Abu Omar is a bad guy. Sabrina's retort would be, but you didn't have to send him to Egypt to be tortured.
In addition to that, she would also note that the investigation on him was sort of shelved, and the prosecutor said, in this interview that, and Kaj had this exchange with him, that, if the CIA did not move in and render him to Egypt, he would actually be in jail today. What was interesting that he noted is that this rendition actually derailed all of the most of the terror investigations that they had that were taking place. In fact, we have a clip on that. Michael, can we show that?
Was Abu Omar a terrorist? Was he supporting terrorist operations here as part of the Milanese network?
Quando Abu Omar fu rapito, la procura di Milano e la polizia di Milano stavano indagando su di lui. Stavano indagando su di lui come terrorista e sui suoi complici. Se non fosse stato rapito, lo avremmo arrestato noi e avremmo arrestato molti altri complici. Abu Omar, con ritardo dovuto al sequestro, infatti è stato condannato come appartenente a un'associazione terroristica.
So, as as Spataro, the prosecutor, said, I mean, this was, this rendition, this single rendition, apparently, derailed their efforts to, to pursue members of this network. So, thanks for that question.
I have one more, which is,
bring it.
I'm trying to sort of like place our moment in history. And I guess the question that I have is, immediately in the post 9/11 era, we have these kind of extrajudicial renditions that are taking place. We have these kind of intelligence agencies that are kind of almost working as a cabal outside of, the bounds of various nation states. They're organizing together. They're sending people all over the place. They're, playing kind of like hot potato with who's going to torture someone. And now I think we're sort of seeing like a return a little bit to these kind of extrajudicial actions. The French have their state of emergency, which has been declared now. And are we just sort of looking, in terms of this war on terror, which is becoming this war on ISIS? Are we just looking at, are we going to continue doing this for the next 50 years where some sort of terrorist event happens and we just oscillate between a cold and a hot war, and between respecting territorial sovereignty and law and, doing what needs to be done? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'm sure Kaj has some important opinions about that.
Yeah, I mean, both Jason and I, both as a reporter and in my former career as an operator, have spent literally almost 15 to 20 years thinking about these issues and what's efficacious and what's moral and where are the moral red lines in the war on terror. I think what you're seeing now in the aftermath of Paris is a case of what's past is prologue, right? And we're seeing this sort of cyclical loop where these issues are returning. One of my favorite lines from the documentary, and maybe perhaps provide some insight into your really, really excellent question, is what Spataro said. And with these kind of actions, and he's referring to the CIA rendition and the subsequent torture by proxy, with these kind of actions, we don't stop terrorism, we create more terrorists, is effectively what he said.
Yeah, it's also notable that today, President Obama, in a press conference, a joint press conference with Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, he was talking about Guantanamo. He was asked a question about Guantanamo, and he said, "Look, these attacks in Paris will not deter or derail his efforts to try and close the detention facility." He compared, the fear-mongering surrounding it to the fear-mongering about Syrian refugees. So, the bottom line is that you do have sort of a little bit of a push to try and roll back some of the immediate post 9/11 policies, and I mean real little push. And what's also notable is that not only in this documentary, but in 4 others that that Kaj and I worked on together, each and every CIA officer weighed in on this threat, on this new threat from ISIS. We have the former deputy director of the CIA who said, "Look, you can't kill your way out of this war, and it's really important that we gain proper intelligence to know, to learn about the people who want to kill us." That's how he put it. He was discussing how he doesn't believe how drone strikes are useful because it would lead to the creation of more terrorists. The architect of the CIA's interrogation program saying that it's important to capture these folks so we could question them. He didn't mention that we needed a return to the interrogation program as we knew it. So you have many different viewpoints on this. But just over the weekend, I spoke to a former FBI counterterrorism officer for a report I put together for Vice News, and he said that the reality is that we're going to face more attacks, and this is the world that we currently live in, and our intelligence agencies are going to look for new powers, for new means in which to wage this war, And the bottom line is that Congress will likely, grant the intelligence community its wish. So kind of remains to be seen how, what will happen, obviously, after 2016 when we have a new president, but that's sort of the situation that we're in currently.
Do you guys have any insight into how the relationship between the CIA and I think it's the, what is it, SISMI, the Italian agency, has changed since this took place?
We don't really. Obviously, at the time in 2003 when this rendition happened, there was a lot of talk about collusion between certain members of SISMI and the CIA. I suspect that now that, well, in the decade and a half since that rendition took place, by necessity of cooperation, the intelligence community around the world has actually, especially among NATO allies, right, has deeply increased, and they have a healthy working relationship. This is obviously the most fractured of that because of the conviction, but you also have to remember that the Italian court system is entirely distinct from the intelligence services. So look, best guess, the Italian intelligence community and the American intelligence community are getting along just fine. And the more macro picture is how, from a policy perspective, do you sort of set limits on that cooperation?
Thanks so much for your questions. We're going to need to jump, and appreciate that. Appreciate the very important questions about this.
Yeah, Sam, thanks for coming on, man. So, guys, look, we've got one last tweet, and then let's call it a day. Monas Khan sent us this tweet, and it's kind of interesting. He's referring to the Paris attacks, and he wants to know, do intelligence agencies bear any responsibility for letting Abdelhamid Ababoud, I murdered his name, letting him sift through the cracks? So I think what Monas is getting at is the damned if you do, damned if you don't nature of intelligence in the post-9/11 world. So I'm just curious, from your guys' perspective, where's the line? Where's the balance? Yeah,
right. As I indicated, Michael, right. Right after the attacks last week, I spoke to a former FBI counterterrorism officer, and he said that one, unless you are actually sitting there with the intelligence in real time, evaluating it. And it's not just the electronic, intelligence, the physical intelligence that they may have received. It would be very difficult to find out that this was happened. At the same time, you have another former FBI counterterrorism officer who says that this indeed was an intelligence failure in the same way that 9/11 was an intelligence failure. And the knee-jerk response now from officials like FBI Director James Comey and John Brennan over at the CIA is that we need more powers. We need to crack encryption. We need to continue to conduct the type of surveillance that may have led to Americans being spied on. But the fact of the matter is that even with these programs that have been in place certainly after 9/11 and before, that they've never really done anything. There are very few examples where you could look at that and show that it's actually led to these types of attacks being thwarted. So there is a responsibility, and I'm sure there'll be after-action reports about that, taking a look at it. But that remains to be seen. Who's gonna who's gonna be held to account for that, if anyone.
Yeah, and I'll just add very quickly that it's the job of Leopold and I to contain or to report and evaluate on what have been some obvious overreaches by the intelligence community at this, and look at excess and overreach by the intelligence community around the world, whether that's the CIA or the Italian intelligence community. That's our job, right? We're a check on that. That's the power of the fourth estate. At the same time, their job is vastly difficult. They have an extraordinary amount of data to try and collect and collate and analyze and pick out these needles in the haystack that could represent a threat to either the United States or to whichever respective country, just any kind of terrorist threat. So I'm empathetic that it's a hard job. It's also why they have giant budgets. I think at the end of the day, the intelligence community, they'll do their job and try and do the best they can to prevent attacks, and we'll do our job, which is to check them when they expand beyond their powers and what they should be doing.
Indeed.
Well, gentlemen, with that, let's wrap things up. Kaj, why don't you say goodbye first?
Jason, come on back to LA. We miss you.
I miss you, man. I need that warm weather. I will see you early next week. And
absolutely. Thank you everybody for Skyping in.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for coming on the line. Kaj and I have more documentaries, more in the works, and so look out for that down the road. And thanks for being here. See you, Kaj.
It's rare for CIA officers to speak critically and publicly about the agency's secret operations. But the fallout from the Abu Omar rendition is unprecedented. The prosecutor, the politician, Sousa herself share a common thread. They want answers and demand accountability. Yet each of them, pursuing their own agendas, threatens to reopen a Pandora's box that both the Italian and American governments want closed. In this case, Sousa, all alone, desperate to clear her name, threatening to reveal sensitive information, is playing an international chess game whose outcome is unknown.